In February of last year, I made a video ranking every anime that I watched in 2024, one of those animes being MF Ghost Season 2. The sum up of my thoughts is that Season 2 was better than Season 1 in every way. The Ashinoko GT race was more interesting, the environments looked less dead because of the convenient rain and fog, they touched up on the animation a bit, and the Eurobeat selection was superior, but as a big Eurobeat fan, I recognized almost all of them and wished there was some more variety. So with the news that Season 3 was on the way after the conclusion of Season 2, I was curious on how it would improve on the aspects I talked about, and if it would bring anything new of interest. But before we get into Season 3, we need to talk about the structure of the previous seasons because it not only affects how the narrative was presented, but it also affected the structure of Season 3 and consequently the upcoming final season. In Season 1, the focus was the Odawara Pikes Peak, being the first race of a total of 5 in the manga. The season ran for a total of 12 episodes, 8 of which being focused on Odawara, including qualifying. A lot of the time spent in the first arc is used to introduce the new characters and plot, which meant that the anime could comfortably fit all of the material for the first race over the majority of the season. The Ashinoko GT arc did bleed a bit into the end of the first season, but it only focused on the qualifying, which helped build hype for a potential second season at the time, and made it so there were no chunks of significant narrative left out or cut off from what was covered in the manga. Season 2 of MF Ghost can be broken up into two distinct parts: the Ashinoko GT, which was the main race that the season focused on, and the beginning of the Manazura Peninsula, which included everything pre-race and surprisingly the first 2 laps of the race. The Ashinoko GT took up a majority of the season, from episodes 1 to 8, leaving 4 more episodes to cover in the 12-episode season. During the release of Season 2, and about a few days before the final episode of the Ashinoko GT arc, the official MF Ghost social media accounts put out a trailer revealing what would be to come for the remainder of the season. Even though this season was slated to be a 12-episode release, the trailer revealing parts of the qualifying and the first 2 laps of the Manazura Peninsula gave the impression that there was going to be more content for Season 2, perhaps even including the entirety of the third race. Of course, however, that didn't happen. MF Ghost's Season 2 would end off on a cliffhanger after Kanata Katagiri being put in his lowest point. This is where the problem of the pacing and writing of the story from the manga already comes into play before the anime even makes it to Season 3. Where the first season was able to pace itself better because it was forced to introduce the characters and circumstances and give more exposition to the world, Season 2 and beyond don't have that same kind of luxury from the manga's writing of subsequent arcs to space out its events in a more satisfying way, resulting in Season 3 picking up about a third into the race. It's not necessarily the fault of the anime's production, but because of the lack of story events that happened in between the Odawara and Ashinoko races, and in between the Ashinoko and Peninsula races, there's a sort of misalignment when it comes to the presentation of the narrative in the anime. MF Ghost Season 3 is structured into 3 parts: the continuation of the Manazura Peninsula, the summer arc, and the first half of the seaside double lane. I won't harp on this misalignment point for much longer because I'm sure you're able to see how disjointed it makes Season 3 seem. And of course, this will cause the upcoming final season to start off in the middle of the seaside double lane race. This kind of thing wouldn't be an issue if you began watching anytime after the anime is completed, but as a viewer watching as the anime is still coming out, it's pretty jarring. Imagine if they did this kind of thing in the middle of an initial D race because they were restricted due to how many episodes were greenlit for the season. Granted, those races are obviously much shorter, but you get my point. I think it's no surprise to a lot of people, myself included, that the story and writing of MF Ghost is the weakest point of the series. Even though this was the season that I was the most excited for, as someone who's read the manga, I also knew what was to come on the flip side of the coin. Let's start with the Manazura Peninsula. Kanata's struggle in this race is simultaneously the most amount of character development we've seen from him in a race, and also one of the most terrible ways to write it because the struggle feels like a forced plot device just to put Kanata against the odds. There's no main struggle resulting from the opponents he's racing being more skilled than he is or any kind of other internal struggle. Now, injuries in motor racing are very common, and I think this could have still worked with this being one of the main forces working against Kanata. The problem is that the injury is used as the only restraint on Kanata's performance to keep him as the underdog, when his established skill as a racer would seemingly be more than enough to contend with the top 2 for the entire race. For 2 seasons, Kanata was the underdog, not because he was an incoming inexperienced driver, but because he was forced to use a severely underpowered car. This is an issue with Kanata's character as a whole outside of the anime, and believe me, I could make a whole video on him alone, but I'll try to keep it brief for now. Comparing him to Takumi Fujiwara, the protagonist of Initial D, he was also written to use an underpowered car for the underdog story. But the difference between him and Kanata is that Takumi still struggled. He was very skilled as a novice racer, but he had to learn new skills and adapt to new conditions and courses that were unfamiliar to him. It showed genuine growth in his character and learning experience, making it satisfying to see him win when he overcomes the obstacles. Kanata, on the other hand, is a highly skilled professional racer and seemingly already knows all there is to racing coming in episode 1. Almost every time Kanata has been shown to be in contention with another racer or the course, he's able to overcome it without much of a visual inner struggle because he's the main character doing epic things. So when Kanata is shown to be at his lowest point in the Manazero Peninsula, it comes across as forced and there isn't as much of an incentive for the audience to care as much as the story intends them to. Kanata doesn't appear to show any growth as a racer, so his character journey in this arc is to overcome the injury that he got from saving Ren during last season. What character growth does this demonstrate for Kanata? That he's determined to not give up? Are we to assume that he hasn't already been giving it his all during the past 2 races? I'm sure you see my point. The one thing that I do like about the injury is how it ties into the reveal of Kanata's father in the story. Even though Kanata's injury gets healed with some fantasy Deus Ex Machina plot device, I do like how it sets up learning about Ken Katagiri later on in the season and getting introduced to a bit more of Kanata's family. Beyond that, I still think the whole spirit healing thing is outlandish, but it's not as if Initial D didn't have its moments either. While we're still on the topic of the Manazero Peninsula, I would like to highlight one more thing, and that's Koki Sawatari. I think it's fun watching him plot against someone who's supposed to be the almighty king, Michael Beckenbauer. It's both hilarious and cool to see him try to do everything to one-up Beckenbauer, because as far as the writing is concerned, he's the only racer other than Kanata who can give him a run for his money. I just wish he didn't have that one glaring gimmick of being into 17-year-olds, but I'm sure everyone has complained about that to death on the internet. The summer arc has the most substantial amount of story events relating to Kanata's development outside of racing. In theory, having this break to explore more of Kanata's character and confront his more personal struggles is a good way to get us, the audience, to care more about him and see some changes in his motivations and status quo. In a way, Shigeno did deliver on that, but not very effectively. Kanata's discovery for his feelings for Ren is something that's clearly been building up in the story so far. MF Ghost's B-plot has been trying to get Kanata and Ren to be together, so it doesn't really come with much surprise, but it is something new for Kanata's character, I guess. The reveal that Kanata's father has been watching him this whole time and Kanata realizing that he was the one to give him the strength to overcome the injury is also a nice character moment where we get to see Kanata in a more vulnerable position. The biggest episode that showcases the more slice-of-life sides to Kanata in a great way, in my opinion, is Turn 29, when he and Ren visit her grandmother in Niigata. On rewatch, this is a great feel-good episode on its own, and we get to see a more innocent side to Kanata. The beach half episode in Turn 31 is kinda just more fan service. Personally, I don't have any strong feelings about the fan service in MF Ghost for the most part. I kinda just dismiss it. Though I can certainly understand the big sentiment in the community against it, especially with Ren. Also, Shigeno, can we stop having adult men be sexually interested in high schoolers? I do like how Kanata and Shun's friendship is strained in this episode, and it's fitting given how Shun took up that big brother rival role for Kanata from the start. It's just, having the big fallout being about a girl is just an odd choice. I feel like it would be way more fitting to have their friendship challenged through their positions as racing drivers. Have their fallout be because Shun feels inferior to his Kohai and is jealous of his skills to set up Shun one-upping Kanata in the next race, but then I guess that would require Shun to actually be competitive enough to match Kanata. Or have their friendship be challenged because Kanata wronged him in a race, like bumping Shun and causing him to spin out. There's so much potential for this Kohai-senpai relationship to be deeper, and I don't know why Shigeno decided Ren would be the point of contention between the two. The overall conflict and sequence of events between the two is fine, it's just the actual conflict of interest that I have an issue with. One addition that the anime made that I did like was them showing Shun still feeling upset about hitting Kanata before he goes into the water to play with the others. It's a small addition, but one that does more justice to Shun's character than how the manga did by just making it seem as if he was able to completely get over it in the moment. The summer festival with Kanata and Ren is just another whatever moment to me. It doesn't really add much. I've already talked about how the seaside double lane got shafted because of its cutoff halfway, but there are some other things worth mentioning in this first half. I do like how this builds more on Michael Beckenbauer's character development that started in Season 2. He's not just a stone-cold loner, as he's willing to cooperate with Kanata in order to get back to the top. It's a new side to Michael that gets us to see that he's not all that bad. I would have been fine if he stayed as a flat character to be this overarching force in the story, but it's nice to see some growth from him. I like the idea of Shun and Kanata finally getting a chance to duke it out, but it really falls flat when it's over in one overtake because Kanata was still working with Beckenbauer at the time. Shun says he studied Kanata so much that he should have been able to counter him, and then it's all for nothing because Beckenbauer was in the picture. There's no payoff to the rivalry that's been established since Season 1. If this is supposed to be Shun's big moment, it did not deliver. Ironically, Shun's best scene in my opinion, and that will probably ever get in the anime, was at the end of the Manazuru Peninsula where he squeezed into the off-ramp with Sakamoto. Kitahara getting some spotlight in this race is cool for some development on her character. The fact that she's able to follow through with Kanata and Beckenbauer kinda says a lot for her skill as a driver, and as we'll see in the final season, there will be more where that came from. I don't know if what I'm about to say is controversial, but I actually think Kanata and Ren's relationship could have worked if it was actually written well enough to have a meaningful impact. This stems from a more general issue of Ren's character being a very generic love interest in a story that's predominantly attracting fans for the racing. I don't think it's a bad inclusion to have romance as a B-plot, and in fact, Initial D handled it fairly well in first to third stage. But a big part of Ren's characterization even up to now has just been, I'm in love with Kanata, but I can't tell him. This static character writing becomes unsatisfying to watch, and it makes me care even less about Ren in a story where I already wasn't going to indulge much in romance because of the main emphasis on racing. That being said, I do think she has a good moment in this season after her and Kanata leave Gunma, where she comforts him and makes him realize that there are other people that are willing to worry for his circumstances. It's not the greatest, but I appreciate that Shigeno gave her something here. I don't think Kanata and Ren's relationship is ever really challenged much. Even with Emma Green and the introduction of the idea that Kanata will be leaving after the race season, there's never any kind of conflict between the two. Maybe you could argue that Ren being an angel kissing Kanata causes some awkwardness between the two, but that's not really touched upon this season. I feel like that's one of the most fundamental pieces to writing a love story, and yet the whole conflict is just Ren being unable to tell Kanata how she feels. There's a lot more that I can nitpick in the writing, especially when it comes to the racers, but I think there are many other creators who have already talked about those points extensively. Most of these issues stem from the source material, and it's not really something the anime would be able to fix unless they made major changes to it. And for as much as I critiqued MF Ghost Season 3 so far in this video, I don't hate it. In fact, I still enjoy watching this series, just with the catch that you kinda have to turn your brain off to fully embrace that suspension of disbelief. It's why, despite all of the flaws that I've been pointing out, I still like watching it on a surface level. Part of the title of this video does imply that this is the best season so far, and it definitely is. By far, the Manazuru Peninsula and the Seaside Double Lane are the most interesting races we've had yet, in terms of stuff happening. And we get to see Kanata actually be in contention with the top two racers, which the audience has been anticipating for the past 2 seasons. The racing is the most fun part to watch by far. If you're not questioning stuff like how the skill gap between Japan's top 15 racers is so high and how incompetent some of them seem to be, it's a very fun watch. There's the most stuff going on that there ever has been. Some particular favorite moments of mine in this season are the Senna overtake in turn 25, Koki using Akaba to slipstream in turn 27, Kanata and Michael's side-by-side battle in turn 28, and the Kanata vs Yanagida battle in turn 36. Speaking of the racing, in terms of visuals, this is also the best MF Ghost has ever looked. The scenery isn't so boring anymore now that the story has taken the races to different locations with way more variety, and it's much easier for the viewer to identify points of interest in the circuits, rather than just the same plain old mountainside road set. They went full on for the action shots in this season, and I'm here for it. There's so much camera movement and zooms that make it feel like you're watching an action flick. Knowing what's coming in the final season, I am really excited to see how the racing turns out in the anime because I think they did a great job here. And on the topic of CGI, I found it interesting how we get to see almost the full models of Kanata and Ren in Turn 29. I don't recall them ever showing much of the CGI models of the humans before, not that they needed to obviously, but it's just something neat. This is another issue that's pretty glaring. The faces are drawn so inconsistently from episode to episode. It's not even a camera perspective thing. Sometimes the characters will just look off from what they usually do. It's not something that really bugs me, but I can totally see if it does for you. Keisuke driving. I think everyone can agree that this is one of the highlights of this season, and honestly I wish they would have just shown him drive the entire Akagi downhill in an anime original montage. This is nostalgia baiting to the max. Keisuke in a yellow car driving down Akagi at night. I mean, this is the closest to Initial D that you're gonna get in this series, and I love it. There is one more thing about this season that I haven't touched on, and it actually kind of ruins this season for me. For as much as I criticized the writing, it's easy for me to overlook it because I already knew what was going to happen. I watch MF Ghost because I want to see all the cool car action. Naturally, with all that action, I was anticipating what kind of Eurobeat selection they'd have for this season. And this is probably the worst use of the soundtrack yet in the anime. There are so many reused Eurobeat songs in this season that get used for more than one moment, some even being reused in this same season that they got introduced. As someone who's a big Eurobeat fan and knows there's so much more out there, it was really disappointing to hearing the amount of reused tracks in this season. This is arguably one of the things that should have been easy to get right in the anime, because no matter how nonsensical this or Initial D ever got, the Eurobeat was one of the main things that always makes us come back for more. Eurobeat has become a core of these two series, so it being subpar in this season really brings the hype a level down when you can notice the same songs are being used. This was a complaint that I had in Season 2, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad, and it was because they reused 2 songs from Initial D. Both of which are good songs. I just would have preferred if we got newer and different songs, but I appreciate the callbacks if that was their intention. Spirit of the Night by David Dima has become a recurring song for Michael Beckenbauer, and in that case, I'm okay with them reusing it because they've established that song as a sort of theme for him. That is a thing that they've only done for him and him alone, so the other moments of reusing Eurobeat doesn't really get that same pass. It's so disappointing coming off the backs of Season 1 and 2 where there were so many varied songs for them to just throw in the towel when it came to Season 3. Avex owns how many Eurobeat songs? Are you sure you couldn't have licensed out a bit more music? It's pretty telling when you can see that 4 of the Eurobeat songs were used twice in a season with 22 instances of licensed music. Not to mention the fact that 6 out of the 17 Eurobeat songs were already songs featured in Season 2 and the opening of Season 1. There are a few tracks that really stood out to me in this season. Run Run Babe by Go2 is a song that I haven't heard before, and it's easily my favorite from this season. Red Zone by Rei Hikari, the song in the K-Truck scene, was produced by Eurobeat Union, the same circle that's worked on a bunch of Toho Eurobeat, and the Initial D the Arcade soundtrack. Avex, if you're running low on options for Eurobeat, please bring these guys onto the soundtrack for the final season to make some new stuff. Disco Fire is a great song, and I actually didn't know that this version under the alias Neo was the original. I only ever knew Kyle's version. And lastly, hearing Ready to Go by Mega NRG Man for the first time in years gave me a bit of whiplash, as someone who used to play a lot of Initial D Street Stage. By no means is the soundtrack selection bad in this season, but its recycled use in the anime really brings the experience down, at least to me. While not a Eurobeat song, having Rage Your Dream playing in the first episode was a really heartwarming throwback to us Initial D fans, so you got me there. I don't know if this has any correlation with the fact that Season 3 got a bunch of reused songs, but back in December, many Eurobeat songs were removed from Spotify from the original Super Eurobeat Presents Initial D selection compilations. This is most likely because the licenses for those particular songs just happened to run out, but since then they haven't been renewed. Some of these songs can be found in other Eurobeat compilations, albeit extended or different versions. Maybe Avex had some recent trouble with song licensing, hence why there were a lot of reused songs in this season, but I find that a little hard to believe when they literally own such a vast catalog. I know it's not that simple even though Avex Pictures, the producer of MF Ghost, is a subsidiary of Avex, but who knows. Something also of note is that they never released the MF Ghost Presents Super Eurobeat X Original Soundtrack New Collection Volume 2 that released for Season 2 onto streaming platforms, at least not outside of Japan to my knowledge. They were able to release the soundtrack outside of Japan for Season 1, but didn't do it for Season 2 for whatever reason. And the Eurobeat collection for Season 3 is currently in printing as of writing this video, and chances are that won't be released on streaming services either. All that we can hope for now is that Avex is able to give us a decent, diverse soundtrack for the final season of MF Ghost. Hopefully one that uses little to no repeats. MF Ghost is a very flawed series, but it's because I actually care about it that I criticize it a lot while still finding stuff to enjoy. Even though the manga already finished last year, there's still so much potential that this story has, and even small tweaks in the writing could go a long way to making this a more cohesive and enjoyable experience. Season 3 showed some nice improvements in their adaptation, but the viewing experience left a lot to be desired because of the fundamental block that is the writing of the manga, and among other small details. I'm not really the kind of person that likes to be overly negative or think that there's nothing to like about even a subpar anime, but I've seen and know there's things that can be done better. As of writing this script, MF Ghost's final season production is currently underway, and I look forward to seeing how Felix Film will deliver. I'll definitely be making a video on it after it finishes airing. Maybe I'll see you again, and take care.